Imagine walking into a luxury hotel, only to be thrown out because of who you are. Now picture returning as its owner. This is the story of James Thompson, a man who turned humiliation into power. Stay tuned to see how he changed everything.
The atmosphere at the Grand Imperial Hotel was charged with tension that morning. Staff murmured anxiously, their gazes darting to the entrance as a sleek black luxury car rolled up. Emerging was James Thompson, a tall, impeccably dressed black man exuding calm authority. His arrival sent shockwaves through the lobby. Days earlier, they had shamed and expelled him as if he were an unwelcome trespasser. Now he returned, not as a guest, but with a purpose. He walked confidently to the reception desk, locking eyes with the receptionist who had previously turned him away. Without flinching, he placed a thick folder bearing a golden seal on the counter. "We need to discuss some matters," he said with a steady voice. The receptionist faltered, her hands shaking as she opened the documents. Her breath caught. A hush fell over the lobby as the truth hit. James Thompson now owned the Grand Imperial Hotel. But how did this dramatic turn of events unfold? What sparked this stunning reversal? Before diving into this remarkable tale, share where you're watching from, and if you stand for fairness and accountability, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. 3 days prior, James Thompson arrived at the Grand Imperial Hotel, a majestic symbol of opulence in New York City's heart. He pulled up to the valet in his polished black Bentley, stepping out with the poise of a man who had earned his success through relentless effort. His tailored suit was flawless, his shoes gleamed, and his demeanor demanded respect. Yet, as he handed his keys to the valet, he sensed trouble brewing. The young white valet barely acknowledged him, prioritizing 2 white guests who arrived just after. James waited, observing as their luggage was handled, doors opened, and courtesies extended with efficiency. When the valet finally turned to him, it was with a skeptical glance. "Are you sure this is your place?" the valet asked, his tone light but mocking. James's jaw clenched. He'd faced this too many times, yet the sting lingered. He offered a cool smile and slipped the valet a $100 bill. "I'm certain. Look after my car." The valet paused, then took the bill with a reluctant nod, walking away without further comment. Brushing off the annoyance, James adjusted his cufflinks and stepped into the lobby, where the hotel's splendor was undeniable. The ceiling towered above, adorned with dazzling chandeliers. Marble floors shone under soft golden light. Every element screamed wealth and exclusivity. James was no stranger to such venues, yet he felt the subtle shift in the air as he entered. It was as if an invisible alert had sounded, signaling that someone like him had breached their domain. As he crossed the lobby, he caught guests stealing glances. Some were merely curious, others seemed uneasy. Then came another blatant slight. A middle-aged white man in a costly suit passed by, heading for the concierge. His eyes flicked over James before he smirked and paused beside him. "Excuse me, could you grab my bags?" he asked, pointing to heavy suitcases by the entrance. For a moment, James thought it was a jest, but the man's dismissive tone clarified otherwise. "I'm not an employee," James replied calmly, holding the man's gaze. The stranger paused, surprised by his error, then shrugged. "My apologies," he said, but his smirk betrayed a hint of condescension, suggesting the mistake wasn't entirely innocent. James exhaled slowly, forcing himself to move past it. He had a crucial meeting ahead and refused to let petty biases derail his focus. He approached the front desk, intent on checking in for the business deal that brought him here. At the desk, a young woman with a polished look offered a rigid smile. She glanced at him, then at her computer screen. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you?" she asked, her voice cool and overly formal. "I have a reservation under James Thompson," he said, placing his ID and credit card on the counter. She hesitated briefly before nodding and typing. James observed her closely. Something was off. The faint frown, the brief pause in her typing, the way she avoided his eyes. Moments later, she looked up with a tight smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no reservation under that name. Are you certain you booked here?" James's face stayed neutral, though frustration simmered inside. He had reserved weeks ago, with a confirmation email to prove it. He knew this game. The subtle, slow denial meant to make him feel out of place. "I'm certain," he said, his voice steady. "This is the Grand Imperial Hotel, isn't it?" She nodded with mock sympathy. "Yes, but I've checked twice. No reservation exists under that name." James pulled out his phone, displaying the confirmation email. "Here's the proof," he said, showing her the screen. She glanced at it, her expression blank, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir, but it's not in our system." Before James could reply, a man in a crisp gray suit approached with an air of practiced authority. This was Michael Spencer, the hotel manager, his hair neatly combed, movements precise. His smile was courteous, but his eyes held a cold edge. "Is there an issue?" he asked smoothly. The receptionist quickly recounted the situation, her voice hushed to avoid attention. Spencer turned to James, giving him a quick once-over before speaking. "We have no record of your booking, sir," he said with a hint of condescension. "Are you absolutely sure you reserved here?" James maintained his composure, though he felt the weight of their judgment. "I have the confirmation right here," he said, holding up his phone again. Spencer barely looked at it, waving it off. "That's unnecessary," he said smoothly. "We maintain strict standards here, and without a reservation in our system, I must ask you to leave." James's jaw tightened. Spencer's tone, the receptionist's averted gaze, the shifting lobby atmosphere. It was no mistake. This was deliberate exclusion. They had judged him the instant he walked in, dismissing his wealth and success. They had decided he didn't belong. The air grew heavy with tension as silence blanketed the lobby. Guests began to notice, some watching curiously, others ignoring the scene. James spotted a security guard nearby, inching closer, ready for a signal. He saw Spencer's confident stance, exuding control in that moment. James took a deep breath, weighing his options. He could argue, demand a higher authority, make a scene. But that was what they expected, losing his cool, acting aggressive, confirming their biases. He wouldn't give them that victory. Instead, he locked eyes with Spencer, his voice firm. "Very well," he said. "But this isn't finished." He turned and strode toward the exit, each step deliberate. As he passed the guests, he heard their murmurs, their stifled amusement, their judgments. Their eyes followed him, assumptions hardening. Outside, he adjusted his jacket and took a steadying breath, forcing clarity. His phone buzzed, his business partner asking his whereabouts. The meeting was imminent, and this disruption threatened everything. His mind raced. This wasn't just a canceled booking. His reputation, his deal, his standing were at stake, undermined by a few prejudiced gatekeepers. But as he glanced back at the Grand Imperial's towering facade, a cold resolve formed. This was far from over. What began as a business trip had transformed into something greater. He had been shamed, dismissed, cast out as insignificant. But he would return, not as a guest, but as the one wielding all the power. James Thompson stood outside the Grand Imperial Hotel, fists clenched, pulse racing. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, a calculated plan took shape. He had spent years in boardrooms where men like Michael Spencer underestimated him with polite smiles. navigating spaces where whispers hushed when he entered. He had overcome barriers meant to break him, defied limits set to confine him, and built an undeniable legacy. Yet, in this moment, his wealth, businesses, and magazine covers meant nothing. To Spencer, the receptionist, and the watching guests, he was merely a black man who didn't belong. That was their error. He exhaled, sharpening his focus, channeling his anger into action. His meeting awaited, and he wouldn't let these people derail it. He called his assistant. "Find me a nearby venue now," he said sharply. Within minutes, she secured a private lounge at another upscale location, and James headed there without looking back. But the damage was done. By the time he arrived, his associates were uneasy, the air thick with doubt. They had seen the video. Nothing stayed private anymore. A guest had recorded his ejection, and it was already spreading online. His partners hesitated, their greetings strained. They weren't just concerned about the meeting. They questioned what it meant to align with him now. Was he a liability? Would their reputations suffer? James saw it in their cautious handshakes, their guarded words, as if fearing the controversy tied to him. The meeting began, but it was disjointed, fractured. A straightforward deal now felt tainted. His points met hesitance, his assurances wary glances. His solid numbers and projections couldn't erase the stain of his public humiliation at the Grand Imperial. Then came the decisive blow. A key investor, once enthusiastic, spoke up. "James, we admire your achievements," he said, "but recent events have us rethinking. We can't risk being tied to—" He paused, choosing words carefully. But James knew. It wasn't just the incident. It was the optics. A wealthy black man escorted out by security was now linked to his name, making him a risk. James stared at him, then at the silent investors avoiding his gaze. "Let me understand," he said, voice calm but sharp. "You're backing out because I face discrimination." The man shifted uncomfortably. "It's a complex situation, James." James nodded slowly. "No, it's simple. You'll back me when I fit your comfortable image. But when I expose racism's reality, I'm a liability. Is that it?" No one replied. The silence was deafening. James exhaled, jaw set. "If that's your position, I don't want your investment." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "Best of luck with your ventures." He walked out, leaving behind a once promising multi-million-dollar deal, now poisoned. Outside in the cool evening air, he checked his phone. The video had gone viral, with thousands commenting, outraged. Influencers, activists, and celebrities weighed in. The Grand Imperial's reputation was crumbling hourly. In that moment, James saw his chance. He had considered revenge, ways to make them pay. But revenge was fleeting. He wanted more, to seize what they valued and claim it. He called his financial team, lawyers, and advisors. "Find out who owns the Grand Imperial," he said, "and if they're vulnerable." Within hours, the response came. The hotel was owned by a private investor group. Their stocks hit hard by the scandal. Boycotts had slashed revenue, and investors were panicking, some ready to sell. That was all James needed. "Acquire it," he said firmly. "Do whatever it takes." His team worked tirelessly over the next 24 hours. The hotel's value was plummeting, and James struck like a predator. He knew a tarnished luxury brand rarely recovered. The Grand Imperial's investors were frantic, trying to salvage their image, insisting the crisis was temporary. But James knew public perception ruled, and the public demanded justice. By dawn, the deal was in motion. James acquired shares, leveraging his wealth and connections for control. By midnight, it was done. James Thompson was the majority owner of the Grand Imperial Hotel. Standing outside the hotel again, he felt the moment's weight. Just 48 hours ago, They had cast him out as nothing. Now he owned it all. Every employee who scorned him, every guest who mocked him, every executive who dismissed him. They answered to him now. He exhaled, straightening his tie. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about transformation. He wasn't here to reclaim dignity. He was here to redefine everything. His first move? Ensuring Michael Spencer and those who humiliated him knew who held the power. What do you think? Was James right to abandon his investors when they wavered, or should he have persuaded them? Comment 1 if you support his choice. Now that James owns the Grand Imperial, how will he deal with those who wronged him? Stay tuned. James Thompson entered the Grand Imperial Hotel with the quiet authority of a man who needed no permission. The same marble floors shone under his polished shoes. The same chandeliers sparkled. The same exclusivity lingered. But everything had changed. He wasn't an unwelcome guest. He was the owner. Morning light streamed through vast windows, casting shadows as staff turned, their faces shifting from recognition to shock to fear. Whispers spread, nervous and quick, as they grappled with the impossible. Days ago, they saw him ejected, shamed publicly. Now, he stood taller, radiating control that unsettled those who had mocked him. James didn't pause. He strode to the front desk, where the receptionist who dismissed him stood. Her arrogance was gone, her hands gripping the counter. She opened her mouth, but no words came. "I need your manager," James said calmly, his voice unshakable. She nodded, fumbling for the phone. Moments later, Michael Spencer emerged, his confident stride faltering upon seeing James. His smug superiority had vanished, his expression tight with forced courtesy. "Mr. Thompson," he said, voice measured but strained. "I didn't expect you back so soon. Can we assist you?" James let the silence linger, watching anxiety flicker in Spencer's eyes, then pulled a folder from his briefcase, setting it on the desk. "Yes," he said evenly. "Review these documents." Spencer hesitated, then opened the folder, his eyes scanning the legal text, his face paled. "This must be a mistake," he murmured, gripping the papers. His voice lacked its former confidence, now fragile. James met his gaze, unyielding. "No mistake," he said. "As of last night, I'm the majority owner of the Grand Imperial Hotel." A heavy silence engulfed the lobby. The word's weight pressed on everyone nearby. Staff froze, heads turning to the unfolding scene. Guests in the seating area looked up, sensing the shift. Spencer's lips parted, struggling for words that wouldn't come. James let the truth settle before continuing. "After my treatment here, I investigated. Your stock value crashed after that viral incident. Investors panicked, and desperate investors sell when the right offer comes. I made that offer." Spencer was shaken, his confident posture crumbling into something defensive. "Mr. Thompson," he began, voice thin. "It was a misunderstanding. We deeply regret—" "Enough," James interrupted sharply. Spencer's mouth closed. James stepped closer, voice low. "You felt no regret when you had me removed like a criminal before everyone. None when you smirked as guards grabbed me. And certainly none when you decided I didn't belong." Spencer swallowed hard, visibly rattled. The power had shifted, and he struggled to adapt. James tilted his head. "But now," he said, leaning closer, "you regret it." Stepping back, James addressed the gathered staff. "Assemble all employees in the main ballroom now," he declared. "We're holding a mandatory meeting." His tone brooked no argument. Soon, the grand ballroom was packed with employees, standing in tense silence. Some were anxious, others defiant, but all knew this wasn't routine. James stood at the front, surveying them. He saw their resistance, the unspoken doubts. They had thrived under a discriminatory mindset for years. That ended when he took ownership. "Let's be clear," James began, his voice resonating with authority. "This hotel is under new leadership, with new rules." The tension grew. "What happened to me wasn't a one-off. I've reviewed complaints, reports, and a pattern of exclusion here. That stops now." His eyes scanned the crowd, noting those who avoided his gaze and those who glared. "Discrimination will not be tolerated," he said. "If that's an issue, leave now." The words landed heavily. Murmurs of unease spread, some shifting, others crossing arms defiantly. James anticipated resistance. Change wasn't easy, but he wasn't here for comfort. "Starting today," he continued, "all employees will undergo mandatory cultural sensitivity and inclusivity training. No exceptions. Everyone will be held accountable." Some faces showed resentment, but James stood firm. "I know not everyone supports these changes. That's okay. If you can't meet these standards, resign." He paused, letting it sink in. "But if you stay, we're building a place where character, not skin color, matters. Where all guests feel welcome. If you can't support that, this isn't your place." A heavy silence followed. Then Michael Spencer stepped forward, his confidence cracked. "Mr. Thompson," he said neutrally, "surely we can reconsider some changes. The Grand Imperial has a standard, and sudden shifts may disrupt our guests." James faced him, expression neutral. "You're right," he said, pausing. "That's why we start at the top." Spencer frowned, uncertain. James delivered the final blow. "Michael Spencer, you are relieved of your duties as manager. Collect your belongings and leave." The room fell silent. Spencer's face reddened, his mouth opening and closing. "You can't be serious," he stammered, fists clenching. James didn't waver. "I am." Spencer, stripped of his authority, had no choice. With a final glare, he stormed out, footsteps heavy with defeat. James turned to the staff. "Anyone else object to the new leadership?" he asked sharply. Silence reigned. James nodded. "Good." The old Grand Imperial was gone. A new era had begun. James Thompson sat in the executive suite of his hotel, gazing at New York City's skyline as the sun set. The room's silence carried the weight of the past 72 hours. He had been ousted from this building like an intruder, treated as an outsider despite his qualifications. Now, those who mocked, whispered, and dismissed him scrambled to adjust, and he was far from done. Removing Michael Spencer was just the start. The Grand Imperial's foundation rested on subtle discrimination, upheld by policies and unwritten rules that excluded people like James. To survive under his ownership, that foundation had to be dismantled. He was ready for the task. He spent the day enacting changes. All staff, from executives to janitors, would undergo mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Resistance meant dismissal. He began restructuring management, replacing those who fueled the toxic culture with those aligned with his inclusive vision. But not everyone would comply quietly. James saw it in their eyes during the meeting, in the stiff postures of reassigned managers, in the hushed talks that stopped when he entered. Some believed this was temporary, that resistance would restore the old ways. They were mistaken. James knew changing a system required more than rules. It needed examples, and that example came sooner than expected. That evening, walking the hotel's halls, he noticed a shift. Employees once wary now seemed apprehensive. Some avoided his gaze. Others, tied to the old regime, showed veiled resentment. James expected this. Change threatened those who benefited from the status quo. He didn't care. But he cared about what he overheard. Near the back offices, former senior staff whispered urgently. "He won't last," one said. "People like him think they can overhaul everything, but it fails." Another sneered. "He's just posturing. In weeks, he'll be overwhelmed. Investors will oust him." A third added bitterly. He acts untouchable, but his kind always ends up where they belong. James stayed silent, unseen, letting them speak, believing their defiance was hidden. He wouldn't confront them. Words were useless against those rooted in exclusion. Action was his strength. The next morning, his retribution began. A memo announced that all leadership roles would be reviewed. No one kept their position automatically. Reapplications would consider past conduct. Those with discriminatory histories faced not demotion, but removal. Panic spread. Those once untouchable saw their power fade. Some pleaded with James, hiding desperation in corporate jargon. Others rallied investors, claiming his policies would ruin the hotel's legacy. But James was prepared. Investors who doubted him now saw rising bookings from previously excluded guests and social media praise for the hotel's transformation. James turned the scandal into a strength, rebranding the Grand Imperial as inclusive. Investors, driven by profits, aligned with him. The resistance crumbled. The old guard fell. Some left, unwilling to serve under a black man who upended their world. Others were ousted when evidence of bias surfaced. James ensured every firing was public, not for pettiness, but as a message. Discrimination had no place here. But one task remained. Spencer's exit was satisfying, but the receptionist who denied James's reservation, upholding exclusion with a smile, was equally complicit. He kept her on, observing. Now, it was time. That afternoon, he summoned her to his office. She entered stiffly, her face a mask of professionalism. "Mr. Thompson," she greeted neutrally. James studied her before speaking. "Do you recall me?" The question's weight hung between them. She swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Tell me," he said calmly. "When I stood at your desk 3 days ago, when you said my reservation didn't exist, what were you thinking?" Her breath hitched, but she recovered. "It was a mistake," she said. "I followed protocol." James tilted his head. "Protocol," he echoed. "If I were a white man in a suit with the same reservation, would that protocol apply?" Silence. She couldn't answer. She knew the truth, and so did he. James continued. "I'm not here to ruin you," he said. "But you need to understand. You had power then. You chose to uphold a system that said, 'I don't belong.'" Her eyes flickered. Shame or fear, perhaps. "I can't keep people who make those choices," James said. "You have 2 options. Resign and learn from this, or stay under new terms." Her breathing wavered. "New terms?" James nodded. "You'd start anew. Not at the desk or in management. You'd clean rooms, carry bags, serve guests you once dismissed. Prove you respect everyone, and you might regain a role." Her face paled. It was humbling, but not like her actions against him. It was a chance for redemption she wouldn't have offered him. After a pause, she nodded. "I'll stay," she whispered. James nodded. "Don't let me down." As she left, James exhaled, feeling the moment's weight. The Grand Imperial was transforming, but work remained. Yet, for the first time, he felt satisfaction. What do you think? Did James go too far with those who wronged him, or was he justified? Comment 1 if you agree. Now that he's reshaping the Grand Imperial, what's next? Stay tuned. James Thompson moved through the Grand Imperial with the quiet assurance of a man who knew his achievements. In less than a week, the hotel's power structure had shifted. Whispers faded, tension turned to cautious obedience, and those who once sneered avoided his gaze. Some left, rejecting his leadership. Others were dismissed for past discrimination. The change was swift, beyond his expectations. Yet, resistance lingered. Some saw him as an outsider, disrupting order. He expected this. People clung to corrupt systems. But James wasn't just here to own the hotel. He aimed to transform it, dismantling the system that rejected him. His next step was a meeting with remaining upper management. The conference room held executives who survived the initial overhaul, those who thrived under Spencer, upholding exclusionary practices. They sat rigidly as James entered, their eyes guarded, expressions neutral. But he sensed their resentment, their silent defiance in their adjusted suits, and exchanged glances. James took the head of the table, meeting their eyes, letting silence build discomfort. Then he spoke. "This hotel has long followed one leadership style," he said calmly. "That style fostered a culture that recent events show is outdated." Some executives shifted, glancing uneasily. An older man, steeped in self-importance, leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, we respect your authority," he said smoothly. "But the Grand Imperial's guests expect exclusivity. These policies weren't malicious. They maintained our success for decades." James held his gaze. "Exclusivity," he repeated. "Was denying my reservation part of that?" The man faltered, then recovered. "An unfortunate error," he said neutrally. "A miscommunication." James gave a humorless breath. "Miscommunication," he echoed. "That's a curious way to describe being forcibly removed from a paid booking." The man stiffened, but stayed silent. James scanned the table. "I'm not here to preserve your old standards," he said sharply. "I'm not protecting a culture that excludes. The Grand Imperial won't favor one type of guest anymore. That era is done." Tension thickened. A woman who built her career on exclusivity spoke. "With respect, Mr. Thompson, such changes may alienate loyal guests. Our reputation spans decades." James turned to her. "That reputation," he said, "was ruined when my removal went viral. You don't recover by ignoring it. You prove you're better." She pursed her lips but didn't argue. James continued firmly. "I know some of you hope I'll fail, that resistance will restore the old ways. That won't happen." He paused. "If you can't align with this vision, you're free to go." Silence gripped the room. No one spoke or moved. James nodded. "Good. Let's discuss what's next." Days later, James hired those overlooked by other luxury hotels, ensuring diversity in hiring. The front desk, once a gatekeeping hub, now had diverse faces. New policies ensured equal treatment for all guests, rejecting elitism. Some staff adapted, others were removed. Guests noticed. Old clientele grumbled, but new guests, once unwelcome, arrived, shifting the hotel's energy to warmth and inclusion. Staff saw the benefits, and tension eased. But James anticipated sabotage. When reports of deliberate errors and resistance surfaced, he wasn't surprised. He was ready for those clinging to old power. The final test was an anonymous board complaint, claiming James's policies harmed the hotel's legacy. He read it, smiled, and set it aside. It was Spencer's last attempt, and it failed. The board backed James, seeing his financial success and the cost of old ways. The transformation was unstoppable. That evening, James stood in the lobby, watching diverse guests move freely. He had won, but more awaited. Who would challenge him next? James stood in the grand ballroom, his presence commanding, facing the staff. The tension wasn't about his ownership. It was the final reckoning. The hotel had shifted dramatically. The old power structure was gone, replaced by a new era. James watched the resistors, noting their defiance. He gave them a chance to adapt. Some did. Others clung to old ways. Now it was time to act. He let silence build before speaking. "I value transparency," he said. "You've seen the new leadership, policies, and expectations. Not all agree." He eyed the rebels. "That's fine. You can accept this change or leave, but you can't undermine me secretly." Murmurs began. James raised a hand, silencing them. "I know who you are," he said sharply. Heads snapped up, bodies tensed. "I know about fake complaints to corporate, deliberate errors, overcharged guests, and turned-away bookings to make me look incompetent." Unease spread. Some shifted. Others froze. James stepped forward, voice low. "I let it slide, thinking you'd outlast me. That was my mistake." He faced the ringleaders. "Your time's over," he said. Silence suffocated the room. A former manager, David Barnes, stepped forward, furious. "You can't fire us for disagreeing," he spat. "This isn't tyranny." James didn't flinch. "It's a business," he said. "Undermine it, and you're gone. Like you are now." Barnes protested, but James signaled security. "Escort him out." Barnes laughed bitterly. "This place will fail," he sneered as guards led him away. "You won't last." James tilted his head. "We'll see." Others protested, but James was firm. Within minutes, a dozen were gone. He turned to the remaining staff. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's about a future where merit rules, not appearance. No one will be denied for who they are." He paused. "If you're here, you have a place. But earn it. Fail, and you're next." The message was clear. Over weeks, the Grand Imperial became James's vision. New hires replaced the ousted, and guests felt welcome. The hotel's spirit changed, open to all, but resistance persisted outside. Powerful figures watched, waiting for James to falter, to reclaim their old ways. He had won inside, but the war was just starting. James stood in his top-floor office, watching New York's glittering skyline. It reminded him of the power structures that excluded him, but he had broken through, etching his name into a place that rejected him. Weeks of dismantling prejudice had transformed the Grand Imperial. Guests and staff thrived in its new inclusive energy. Yet the battle continued. A message arrived from former shareholders, led by Michael Spencer, requesting a meeting. James smiled thinly. He expected Spencer's return, the man who once ousted him. In the private lounge, James arrived first, claiming the once exclusive space. Spencer entered, diminished, his arrogance gone. He hesitated, expecting rejection. James gestured for him to sit. Spencer cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, thanks for meeting me," he said, voice lacking confidence. James leaned back. "I was intrigued," he said. "I thought you were done here." Spencer's lips tightened. "I didn't think you'd succeed," he admitted. James chuckled. "You weren't alone." Spencer glanced around. "But you did. You changed it all," he said reluctantly. James waited. Spencer continued. "The shareholders are worried. Your new clientele and policies. They think the hotel's losing its prestige." James raised a brow. "Prestige," he said dryly. "They want a buyback," Spencer said, "to restore the Grand Imperial." James let the words hang. "Spencer, was the hotel better before?" he asked sharply. Spencer shifted, uncertain. "The system worked for years," he said. "For who?" James pressed. Spencer didn't answer. James spoke firmly. "I'm not selling. They can't outweight me. This hotel moves forward, not back." Spencer nodded, expecting it. "I figured," he said, standing. "I underestimated you." James smirked. "Yes, you did." Spencer paused at the door. "Good luck, Thompson," he said. "You'll need it." Then he left. James sat, feeling the moment's finality. Spencer represented the old Grand Imperial, now gone. At the window, James watched the city's pulse. He had reshaped the hotel, rewriting their rules. But he wasn't done. The Grand Imperial's change was about more than one place. It proved power wasn't exclusive, that success defied gatekeepers, that change came with bold action. James was that force. His journey began with discrimination, but became a revolution. The Grand Imperial once exclusive, now stood for resilience. James showed change was inevitable when challenged. His story showed power lies in influence, in reshaping the world, in rejecting limits. He entered as a guest, was ousted, but returned as the rulemaker, ensuring no one faced his humiliation. He won more than personal victory. He created change, showing justice could surpass revenge. But it raises a question. How many face silent struggles, denied opportunities for their appearance? James had resources to fight, but not all do. His story calls us to act against injustice. What do you think? Was James's approach right, or should he have done differently? Comment below. Hit like if you stand against discrimination, and subscribe for more stories. True success isn't just winning, it's rewriting the rules. Stay strong, stay inspired. See you next time.